Hello and welcome to the Biz Coach Show. Your hosts today are Dave Macon, that's me, and Eric Whitmore. Eric, how are you doing today?
Doing excellent, David. Thank you.
Awesome. Fantastic. As always, good to be with you. And if you're tuning in today, we're doing something just a little bit different. Occasionally, we like to kind of pause and answer some of the questions that we get through social media or through our website, or maybe kind of common questions that we see from the clients that we work with. And so we're doing another community Q&A episode today. And if you want to ask a question, again, feel free to connect with us on social media or head over to our website and you can submit questions there as well. And we love hearing from you. We love connecting with you, and we love the questions so that we can answer them on future episodes. And speaking of future episodes, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode upcoming here. We've got some great guests planned for the upcoming weeks, and you don't want to miss out. So be sure to subscribe. So Eric, today, as mentioned, we're answering a bunch of questions. And I think this first one here is definitely near and dear to your heart. I know it's something that we've talked about a lot, and it's how to set your business apart from the competition. Now, I don't know what business this person is in. We didn't quite get into that. I'm trying to follow up with them online. But in the meantime, I thought it'd be a good kind of generic question that we could answer for a lot of people that are trying to figure out how to differentiate themselves. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks, David. So I would assume it's funny as you mentioned that, because I literally this morning, as I'm checking through email and doing my regular updates and stuff like that, I see on one of the softwares that I use for communicating is Alignable, and they had the how to determine your ideal avatar, customer avatar. Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of things when it comes to marketing. They're all interrelated, and it's super. It is challenging for people to really kind of get the notion of, how do I separate myself from the competition? And I think it starts with making sure that you're clearly identified who your ideal client is. Because when you've identified who your ideal client is, you can actually, your language that you use in your messaging to say who you are and allow yourself to set yourself apart from your competition, you get to use the language that resonates with them. So when you think through the idea of, I've and I'm not great at this. I'm good, but not great. I actually lean on some of my marketing partners to help me with this. But, when you're breaking down somebody's business and you're saying, hey, who is your ideal client? And, David, for you, the idea might be, I know that with your background in training and development, my guess would be somebody that's already in the training and development space would be a good client for you. Somebody that is looking to kind of break in that space and maybe grow. A good potential, right? Opportunity there. Yeah. And, so so thinking through that for yourself, what was your career like? What did, in the corporate environment, what were the things that you did, what were some of the things that you focused on, what were the trainings that you took, all that kind of stuff. And so we kind of understand what that is and what that looks like, and who is that person. Is it a converted school teacher that got into training and realized they make a lot more money doing corporate training than being a school teacher? But whatever that looks like. And if it's a school teacher, is it a man or a woman? If it's a woman school teacher that, decided they wanted to get into corporate training, and that was something they were really passionate about because they loved having the impact of changing people's lives and seeing them develop and grow in whatever category they're teaching in or whatever. The point is that by knowing who that person is, and it's, we come to the term that they were a teacher for, say, 10 years. So now they're 35 years old. Now you have a 35-year-old woman, potentially single mom, right, with kids maybe, or, could be still married, but then, trying to pull to a dual income family and all the challenges and tribulations of managing a family while having a full-time career. And what are all the things that go with that? Well, the idea is that by determining who that customer avatar is, when you go to write your messaging then to them, to how you separate yourself from everybody else, you're going to use the language that resonates with them. Yeah. Right. So what are the challenges that they struggle with? And knowing how you developed your career, David, I know that you raised a family, right? And from many of those years, being the primary breadwinner, you're like, you got a lot of obligations and a lot of responsibilities. And at the same time, you're trying to be a good dad and spend quality time with your son and all the things that come with that. So you can speak to that perspective. and how challenging it can be to build the side gig or, whatever it is. Right now, I know that's not your ideal client necessarily, but you get the idea, the concept there.
For sure. Yep.
So the point being is that when we talk about, the coming up with that, what we call a market dominating position, other people refer to it as a USP or a unique selling proposition. What is it that, again, you do differently that other people that do the same business don't do?
Mm-hmm.
How do you segregate yourself from that or that company? I say individual, it could be a company. In my case, we did this multiple times, multiple iterations of My Biz Coaches. And when we started My Biz Coaches, it was just me. There wasn't any other coaches. It was just me. However, what I did have is I had I'm going to call it a stable of other people that were on a similar path, like yourself,
mm-hmm.
like our friend Lloyd, and other people who've been in their business careers for a number of years and have disciplines and experiences that I could call on and I could draw from to help my clients.
Yeah.
So even though, it was My Biz Coaches, it was just me. The reality was what I recognized right out of the gate. I see a lot of coaches out there trying to help businesses, and they put them into a static program. And I just do this one program. And David, you're going to fit into this square box.
Yeah.
Even though you're round, you're going to fit into this square box. And I'm going to make you follow this program. And there's some value to that. There's some structure and there's some processes and systems you can build around that. However, your business is different. And if I can't adapt to that accordingly, then I'm going to lose you as a client at some point.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to go through some of the content and eventually you're going to get to a point and be like, okay, well, that was great, except this is not valuable anymore. Right. I've got all the core concepts or whatever. And then it's just your life experience as a coach that continues to resonate with the client. So kind of long-winded answer, but the point is, at the end of the day, when you're clear on who your client is, and then you have to look at your business model and say, what is it we do different? So at My Biz Coaches, like I said, we have a team of coaches that help our clients, right? And so it's not just one coach selling you one program or one concept or whatever. It's multiple coaches you have access to.
Yeah.
So I may be your primary point of contact, but if you need training and development for your organization, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to introduce them to you, David. I'm going to make that introduction to you because I know that you can do it better than I can do it. And in the end, we win through collaboration, right? So that's my competitive advantage, right? And so to use myself as an example, that's my competitive advantage. That's what we do differently. I'm not trying to sell you one coaching strategy. I'm trying to get you to understand that there's lots of different options. There's lots of people with different experiences. And by partnering with us, you'll get access to all of those.
Right. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
If you look at it, now again, so if I, for instance, if I was a landscaper, what's my market dominating position? Well, anybody can cut grass. Anybody can do. I mean, it's a pretty low. Doesn't take a lot of really good work to do that. However, if you're a landscaper that also does hardscape, which is redeveloping yard and making it look really pretty and all that kind of cool stuff, and maybe you incorporate tile work and maybe even some work around the pool or whatever. Now all of a sudden you're a whole nother quality of landscaper. Now, not everybody's going to understand that, and that's when it comes super important, because once you understand that, now you can incorporate that into your messaging and your marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Eric, I don't know why you had to mention that I was round, but still wrestling with that one.
I saw you smirk for a moment. Yeah. I was like, "Oh, darn it! I should have said."
I wanted to be the square peg. No.
Yes, I know you did.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, it's understanding kind of who you are, what you do, but also clearly understanding what you don't do and who you aren't. Right. So I think to your point, right, if I'm working with a client that really wants to deep dive into their P&L and financials, that's not our niche, right? So I would refer that person to you because I know what I do, I know what we're about, and I know what we're not going to do and what we're not going to specialize in. I think that's important because oftentimes we're trying to be all things to all people when we're marketing, and then that just becomes noise. And so I think you mentioned something that resonated with me, and actually something that I had learned from you many years ago is, as you're talking about refining and understanding that avatar is, when you're putting marketing material together, you're writing a blog post or creating, an image to go on Instagram, you want to be thinking, like, have that mental image of that person, right? So you're not just marketing to
That's
the
right.
void and hoping it sticks. It's, as I'm writing this, I'm imagining the other person, with their phone that's going to see that marketing material and what's going to resonate with that person. And I can visualize what that person looks like, and I've got a very clear picture. So as I'm writing it, it makes it that much more impactful. And that's something I've learned from you and have used for years, and it's definitely helped us grow. So appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's the piece, you're so quick to get out there, and as you know, our category of business, or one of our primary categories of business, service-based businesses.
Yeah.
And we love service-based businesses because, one, you control your pricing, right? Yes, there's competition out there, but if you know how to demonstrate that you're better than the competition through a good market dominating position, you can get a premium price for your services, right?
Yeah.
And even if it's not getting the premium price, it's what all can I offer, right?
Right.
How much can I offer the client? How many different ways can I help the client and do well? To your point earlier, right? I don't just do it because I know how to do it. I do it because I'm really good at it.
Yeah.
Right. And it doesn't have to be about the owner. That's the other thing too. I get caught up with a lot of owners. They're like, well, I'm not that good at that. Well, could you hire somebody who's good at that?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It was like, you take your average landscaper and they're like, okay, let me flip it. If my concept, my eye as a landscaper, I'm going to use that but I'm a hardscape kind of guy. I want to do these really elaborate design layouts and make it look like this ornate backyard with all these cool things and features and all that kind of stuff, which, as you know, in Arizona, it's a very popular thing to do. You want to turn your backyard into a paradise, right?
Absolutely.
Well, if that's your vision, if that's your eye, and that's what you're really good at, you're going to call that out in all your marketing. Your ideal client is going to be probably the slightly higher end client, right? Because they've got to have the additional resources to pay for that kind of service. But then you can make it look super cool with all these really awesome designs. Now, what a great compliment to that business to also come back and service them.
Yeah.
With a regular maintenance client. Well, if you're that big visionary, you're not likely the guy that wants to come and mow the lawn and trim the trees and bushes. Yeah, exactly. However, there are lots of guys out there that would be happy to do that, and you can make them the supervisor of that department or that part of your business, and have a secondary revenue stream that and allows you to continue to expand your client base.
Yeah.
Right. But again, it's all by understanding what do you do differently than the competition. And, when you look at that, and it's an iterative process too. That's the other thing I have to remind people of, myself even. The first time out, it's not clear.
Yeah.
You'll do it again. That process that put people through, that you'll do it again and again and again. And over a span of time, you'll refine it to, now I know who I am.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's when you really have it dialed in and you're comfortable with it. And then we take it to the next level from that.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, hey, the next question is actually very related to this. So I think it's a natural transition. And it's about marketing, and specifically, how much should a small business or medium-sized business, how much should they be spending on marketing?
I always love it when you have all the questions and I'm like guessing at what you're going to ask me.
Like to catch you off guard.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I like this rapid fire. It makes me think. It keeps me sharp in the morning.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so great question. And I will tell you, it varies, but there are some static things that you can leverage. I'll also give you some tips and tricks that you want to kind of steer away from. First thing I would tell you is if you're in a growth mode, it would not be unreasonable. I'm not suggesting this, but it would not be unreasonable to pay upwards of 20% of your gross revenue in marketing, particularly if you're in a growth mode. If you're in a static, kind of sustained mode, 10 to 15%. If you're aggressive, at least 8 to 10% to sustain. Can you get away with less? Yeah. But if you're asking me what's the ideal number, I would say between 8 to 12 probably. And then the higher end, if you're in a major growth mode, you got to expect to pay 15 to 20% of your gross margin. And the nice thing about that is it's not a flat dollar amount. It's a percentage of your revenue. So if you're only doing 150,000 a year, 10% is 15,000. 15,000 a year divided by 12 months, it's a little over $1,000 a month. That's a manageable budget for that kind of revenue. Of course, if it's $1 million a year, it's $150,000 a year, and it's $12,500 a month, something like that.
Yeah.
So, but that's a good strategy. I mean, you could go down to 5, particularly if you're really good at leveraging your marketing dollars. Anything less than 5 would be remiss. You're missing opportunity for growth. And quite honestly, one of the things that, I say this in my goal setting book, but to remind people, if you're not growing as a business, you're dying, you're regressing. Personally and professionally, business or not, it doesn't matter. If you're not progressively doing things to improve and grow, you are regressing. And honestly, all you have to do is go back and look at the 18, 20 some odd months that we were dealing with the COVID crap. Yeah. And people just sat around, and how many people gained weight? How many people got stressed out? How many people, their health got worse? How many people, it's like, yeah, if you're not moving forward, if you're not progressing, if you're not challenging and pushing yourself, you're actually going backwards. Yeah. There's no static. You don't stay static for any extended period of time. So if you stop moving forward, my point is, from a marketing perspective, if you're not investing enough back into your marketing, you'll lose market share and you'll get beat to the punch by your competition.
Yeah, absolutely.
One last thing I need to make sure that I say, for those of people who are using ad spend, if you're doing pay-per-click ad spend or something like that, or one, I would encourage anybody, if you're not doing digital marketing, you need to be doing digital marketing. That should be your primary and where most of your dollars are spent. There is some traditional marketing, i.e. cable, which would be, we would call it TV. It's not really TV anymore. It's a little bit different than it used to be. But the digital marketing through cable, or more specifically streaming video, is a really interesting area of opportunity to market in. It's kind of open. It's a relatively newer category. It's been around for a few years for certain, but for people who are not as adept in the marketing world, that's a good opportunity to look at, particularly depending on what your product is or your service that you're marketing. But one of the challenges is, if you're doing pay-per-click or that kind of video marketing or anything like that, you need to make sure that you have a reasonable ad spend. So the initial example that I gave of $150,000 and you have $1,000 a month, you're not going to make a dent with $1,000 a month in that space. There's just too much competition. There's too many people vying for it. That's not to say that you couldn't be competitive with, I would say low end $2,500, but realistically $5,000, depending on your business niche. So for instance, if you're in a category that gets a lot of attention, financial services, insurance, our coaching business, things like that, if you don't have a $5,000 ad spend, don't even try and enter that world, because it won't be cost effective to you.
Yeah.
So, but
yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I say, yeah, great points. And I would say one of the issues I see is we're talking about spending is sometimes it's tempting to just pour more money into your marketing and not really understand what are your marketing goals, what are the KPIs that you're tracking, are your ads performing well, whether that's digital or otherwise. And so I think that's important. Is the marketing you're doing getting more impressions? Is it higher click-through rate, right? All of those metrics that we look at. And if you're not analyzing those, especially if you're outsourcing it to somebody else, mm-hmm. You should absolutely expect to get regular reporting on the performance of the ads that are being run. And if you're not, then I wouldn't put any more money into it until you understand it. So don't just keep dumping money into your marketing. Make sure the marketing you're doing is working, and then fund what works. So just a quick add on there.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, David, this is probably an episode, quite honestly, as I'm thinking through this evening, because there's so many other things that I would want to say. And a high level, just because you don't have $5,000 a month in ad spend doesn't mean there isn't some marketing you could be doing. You can do some really aggressive stuff. A service-based business, one of the first things I would tell people is make sure you're investing in your Google page. Get your Google set up. Do some good SEO work. It doesn't cost a ton to do that. A few $100s a month is reasonable to make sure that your SEO is ranking well. Don't get sold by a marketer who tells you the only thing you should be doing is SEO, because that's not accurate. It's a good place to start. It's definitely something you should have done. It doesn't take a ton of money to sustain long-term, and it's a great place to somebody who doesn't have a big budget to definitely make an impact in their business.
Yeah.
But if you want to have a million or a multi-million dollar business, SEO is not going to be the only thing to get you there. You're going to have to do quite a bit more than that. So that's why I said if it's a percentage of your gross revenue and you're continuing to grow and scale, you need to look at reinvesting in that. And if you want advice on what you should do, you should talk to somebody who actually has some perspective, who's not trying to sell you marketing.
Yeah.
Because if they're trying to sell you marketing and they're really good at SEO, or their SEO is their niche, they're going to sell you on SEO.
Yeah.
And if you have, let's just say for the sake of argument, you have a $5,000 budget, well, they could, I don't know, depending on some of them, but you probably won't eat up all 5,000, but they'll take a chunk of that. Yeah. That I would recommend, once you put an initial investment into that and it's sustained and you just kind of go back and maintain it, you don't need to put a ton of money into that anymore. And you can reallocate it to some other category. Could be some ads on Facebook or something like that. And all that is dependent on what your business is and what you're doing. So before you go spend a ton of money on marketing, to your point earlier, make sure you're getting the results and make sure that you're marketing in a space that makes sense for your particular business.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, be sure to subscribe, because it sounds like we're going to have a future episode on this. So
we are
if you ask
absolutely
this question, if this is on your mind, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our marketing episode. So, okay, Eric, let's jump to our last question. The question was, my business is really struggling. How do I know when it's time to consider going a different direction? So I don't know if that means like closing shop or like a pivot or what that looks like, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Sorry to hear that. If that's their situation, hopefully it's not that situation. It's just, pivoting, right?
Right. We hope.
Yeah. If it is, so let me quantify that. If it is I think I need to close the doors. That's a tough place to be. I can tell you it's not a place you want to be alone, for certain. I can tell you that from personal experience. But one of the things that I encourage somebody in a situation like that, the first thing I'm going to tell them, this is not life coaching, but do some work on yourself personally, because you're dealing with a ton of stress. I almost let out the bad word. You're dealing with a ton of stress, and it's eating you up from the inside out. So if you're at that point with your business and you're struggling and you're frustrated, it is sucking the life out of you. And the worst part is everybody around you knows it and they see it more than you see it. So that said, if you're in that type of scenario, get advice, get help. I will tell you that there are people out there that can guide you through that process. It doesn't have to be a business coach, although that's obviously what I would suggest, because you want somebody who's got a vested interest in your success. And they'll contract on it. I mean, a quality coach would contract you on a short-term basis, knowing the circumstance, just to help you manage through that, because there are things that you're going to make mistakes on between now and the end, so to speak, that will make it harder for you. And there's things that you can do to make it easier for you, so that you don't come up with a nightmare experience of, having to go through bankruptcy and all the other stuff with that. And bankruptcy as a shutting down a business is one thing. Going through bankruptcy is a whole nother gamut, and not highly recommended for anybody. Now, if it's a pivot of my business is struggling and I want to, is there a different angle or a different approach I should be going? Good acknowledgement. One, if you're even recognizing that at the point you're in right now, that means that you have a good handle on your business. That's super important to understand. Hopefully it wasn't somebody else putting it out for you. But if that's the case, if you're in a situation where the business is struggling, you'd very much like to kind of, look at it and say, how could I do this differently so that I can maximize my potential and get the business back in the right direction? That is a great question. It would certainly depend on the business and where the business is at and what you're even open to doing. But like right off the top, something that I've recommended to a client before on a couple of occasions is, hey, the business is struggling. You're probably not as engaged. I'm guessing. I don't know that. And I mean that in the best sense, right? In the sense that if the business isn't having the success you want, it's likely because you're not, I don't want to say committed, distracted, right? And there's a good chance that maybe it's just not fun anymore. So if you're not passionate about your business, the business isn't fun anymore, then it's quote unquote struggling because you're not giving it your all. So, but does that mean you walk away from it? Absolutely not. You have an asset. If you build it even close to being good, correctly, I should say, then you have an asset that has real value. And you could look at bringing in a partner that could help you, that would re-energize the focus and the drive of taking the business to the next level. And if it's struggling, I recognize the financing could be challenging, but if you brought in a partner, they could bring some money to the table, bring some extra energy, take on some of the workload, balance some of the stress that you're probably dealing with, and allow yourself the opportunity to kind of look at it from a different perspective. So it may not necessarily be a pivot of changing your business. It could be something as simple as pivoting your mindset, right? Struggling, you're struggling, and it may not need to be struggling.
Yeah.
It may just be we're not fully engaged. And that could, for a number of reasons, that could be family issues. It could be health issues, right? There's different reasons why people wouldn't be engaged. It could be you're just bored of the business, right? And then the last thing I would add, just kind of bringing it full circle, is if it's the business is struggling because the industry is changing. People aren't buying what you're selling anymore, or at least not the way that you're selling it, or whatever. You need to take a step back. I would strongly encourage somebody in that situation to look at the competition. What's the competition doing? If the competition is doing something slightly different, pay attention to that. Right. And again, these are all scenarios where if you're not working on your business as much as you're working in your business, you're never going to be able to make these kind of impact changes that you need to make. But if you can step back from the business a little bit and look objectively at it and say, okay, what is my competition doing that I'm not? It may give you some insight into where the gaps and opportunities are, and how you could potentially make some changes to kind of make those pivots that we're kind of thinking about. So, but high level, that was what I was saying. Obviously, there's like a 3-part answer there, so a little bit elaborate, but kind of trying to approach not knowing a full perspective of what they're sharing, as far as what they're going through. But those are the things that off the top of my head I can think of.
Yeah, no, and I think if that resonates with you, if you're listening to this or watching this, I mean, reach out to Eric or I. Work with one of our coaches. I mean, that's I think, as Eric said, a very desperate spot to be in, especially if it's that former scenario. So, reach out, get the help you need. And then I think, just to echo something you said, Eric, that resonated with me is if you're cognizant enough that your business is struggling and you need to pivot, kudos, that's great that you have that level of awareness. A lot of times people don't, and they're just, run the ship aground, right? So good you're not doing that. But then, I think oftentimes if you're realizing it now, it's probably already a little past the point of when we should have pivoted. So you need to take that immediate action to course correct. And again, that's where, a coach can really help you with that and take that massive action to get back on the right track. So that's the other thing that I'd add is, time is of the essence on that. So whether it's you or working with a coach, if you're already feeling it, chances are it's already been going that direction for a while. So you need to jump on it and act immediately. So don't just sit on that if you're feeling that way or if this resonates with you. Take some action, like pause right now and go take some action. You can subscribe later. So
that one time you can subscribe later.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's a great point, David. To your point, the taking action component of that is super important because of the fact, simply because if you've already recognized it, the path to your point is you're already off course. And what's going to end up happening at this point is the longer that you take, you're already struggling mentally with what you should or shouldn't do. Now the challenge is going to become, it's going to be even worse, because then you're going to determine what you need to do. And then you're going to have to mentally process that too. Mm-hmm. So there's still a lot of work to do if you've already acknowledged it and you have hardly cleared the hurdle yet. So the reality is that you work through that scenario, recognize that you're going to have to gird up your loins a couple times as you kind of move through this process, because it won't be easy. Even just simply making a pivot to your business is not easy.
No.
Right. Acknowledging that you have it is a problem, right? Literally, it's the old AA quote, First step is to acknowledge you have a problem, right?
Yeah.
So acknowledge you have a problem. Yeah, exactly. Acknowledging your problem is just step one. There's 11 other steps that come after that. It might not be quite that elaborate, but it is definitely, that's first and foremost. That's important and good that you acknowledged it. Now you got to come up with what's a plan. And then you have to come to terms with it. You need to execute this plan, and it's not going to be comfortable. It's going to require outside of your, it's going to require you to step outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And as we know from life coaching, everything that you want is outside of your comfort zone. So you're going to have to make this pivot. It's going to require you to do things you haven't done before, and challenge things in a different way. So it's going to be a process, but the sooner you get started, the more likely is you're going to have success with it.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, speaking of course correcting, Eric, I know you've got a live event coming up with a lot of great speakers with a lot of great insight that could help people course correct. So why don't we take just a minute as we wrap up here and just talk about the live event that you've got coming up and kind of what it's all about.
Awesome. Again, thanks, David. Appreciate that. I can't beyond tell you that this has been a multi-year plan to try and tie this together and make this work. And then, it's been a couple of false starts because of COVID, a couple of false starts because of, just trying to tie it all together and make it make sense. And what's the right time of year. And then, of course, then we have this big bank fiasco. It seems to be distracting people. So, go figure, right? But we got great people. I'm excited to be able to put this group of people together. Even more excited as we really fine tune this and get ready to introduce everybody to this. I think one of the things I'd like to encourage people, if you're local to Phoenix, certainly I would strongly encourage you to be there. We did make a price discount, and we're actually offering a $50 credit. You can use if you use the link that's in there at Eventbrite, there's a discount code of MBC for My Biz Coaches, MBC early. So if you use MBC early, it's a $50 discount, and that discount will take your price down from $197 to $147, or even from $147 to just $97 for a 2-day event. And the main reason we're doing that is we want to fill the room. We want to make sure it's completely full, and we're recording everything at the event. We will find out next week if we're actually going to be able to live stream the entire event. So we're super excited about that as well. But with that said, love for people to show up. Even if you're close to Arizona and you can get there in a short flight or something like that, maybe drive in, because this is going to be a phenomenal event. And even more excited, we're already beginning to plan for our next event come September, October.
Very cool.
So the last thing I'll say on the event, if you've ever considered possibly getting a coach and you're not quite sure if it makes sense for you or what kind of value you get out of it, this is a great opportunity for you to come and for just $97, get a feel for 2 days of not just the content and information that we provide, because myself and a couple of coaches, we do in some of the presentations. There's about 16, 17 hours worth of content that we're going to provide. We have some awesome Q&A sessions with the speaker group. But in addition to what we're going to teach, you're also going to have access to these other speakers, and each of them have their own disciplines, and they're power partners of ours that we're introducing you to, because we know how valuable their insight and knowledge is, and we want to be able to introduce our clients, or we do currently introduce our clients to these people. But in addition to that, we'd love to expose more people to what they're doing, because we think it's super important for business owners to really have access to all this different type of information.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be awesome. I was just going to say, we've got in the show notes, we'll have the link as well, but definitely check it out. And I think, to Eric's point, even if you're not local, I mean, I'm sure Eric would love to have you in a seat, right? But, get the content recorded after the fact, I think would be awesome too. So, don't forget about that piece of it. And really we've had some of these guest speakers on our show. They're amazing.
Right.
You got a little bit of insight on an episode, but imagine them live and you get to ask questions. I mean, it's going to be a pretty awesome event. So definitely check it out.
Yeah. Appreciate it, David.
So awesome. Cool. Okay. Well, Eric, always good to hang out with you, answer some questions from our community. Again, if you have a question you want to ask, find us on social media, connect through our website. We'd love to answer your questions on an upcoming episode, and don't miss future episodes by subscribing to the Biz Coach Show. Eric, have a good one.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
All right. Talk to you soon.